All right, everybody. This is my very first live. So people may be here, people may not. Pine Creek Doug told me that I need to try going live sometime. So this is me taking his advice. He also gave me the advice on this webcam, which I think is dope. I think it looks great. I'm totally biased because I'm the one who spent money on it, but here we are. So this is the very first Growing Up Fundie live stream, which is pretty dope. I don't have a ton of plans for where I want to go with this, but I have some ideas, I think. Hey, what's up? I see some sunglasses. I see a cool emoji. What's up, LGBTQ Christian? Nice to have you in the chat. So, for anyone who is unfamiliar with the Growing Up Fundie podcast that I run, basically it is a podcast where I interview people who grew up in all forms of super strict religion, whether it was a form of fundamentalist or evangelical Christianity, whether it was Islam, whether it was Judaism, any group, any sect, any religion is welcome. And I have a web form where guests can submit to be guests. And I should, you know what, I should actually put it in the chat. I think I'm going to do that. And then I also reach out to people manually, which is like 90% of how I spend my time is I'm just Googling people, looking people up. But another way that I find guests for the podcast is I ask for them on Discord and Reddit and across the internet. So I'm always taking suggestions. And you're like, but why are you so obsessed with fundy families and people who grew up fundamentalist? So basically what happened was I will tell this story until the day I die. I will never let people forget that I grew up with the Duggars. We weren't super close or anything like that, but we went to the same church as them before they started their own home church. There was a point where they went to my church, and then there was also a playground slash restaurant in my former hometown that kids could eat for 25 cents one night a week. So of course they were there, right? Because there were like 10 of them. There were only like 10 of them at the time. And so we would see them there. We would run into them at Aldi. My mom went to high school with their mom. So I have always kind of been, on the, hey, how's it going? Is it Colt K's or is it Colt Kazi? Like kamikaze? I want to say Colt Kazi, but if I'm getting it wrong, let me know because I want to make sure that I say your name right. But hey, thanks for joining the chat. I'm just telling the story yet again of how I knew the Duggars growing up. I tell you, this is my claim to fame. I've been doing stand-up comedy for 15 years, and I have never had people be as interested in me as they are when I tell them that the cold case, like murder case, aha, cold case, like that, cold case, cold case like that. Oh, but I've never had people be more interested in me than when they find out that I had the same piano teacher as the Duggars and grew up knowing the Duggars, which is pretty wild. Oh, excellent! I'm so glad I got it right. Well, thank you for correcting me. I appreciate it. I'm digging this chat. I'm digging this live chat. This is super cool. I totally screwed up the live stream a minute ago. The link that I have been promoting for like weeks is not the same link that you're using right now because I didn't realize you couldn't practice going live, which I guess entirely defeats the purpose of going live. But I started it, I ended it, and then it posted itself as like a 30-second live. So we're learning together, is what I'm saying. I don't remember where I was going, but yeah. So I grew up with fundamentalist families have always they've always been different, right? Like even when the Duggars went to church with me, we all knew that yeah, I did. Yeah, I did. We all knew that they were like odd, they were like different than everybody else, but we didn't like it wasn't at all what it is now. Now there's like there's subreddits and Instagram pages and entire sources of media dedicated to these gigantic families, both positively and negatively. There's the people who just absolutely think they're fantastic and follow them. And then, oh no, you're good. You're good. Don't worry about it. And then there's also, I have discovered the world of snark, like Fundy Snark, all these different snarks. There's Fundy Snark Uncensored on Reddit. Fundy Snark is like a whole YouTube thing. Didn't know. It was like a world that I wasn't a part of. So then I deep dove. And that's when I started telling my friends, like, oh, yeah, I grew up with the Duggars. And they were shook. They were like, what? Have you ever told anybody this? And then I got COVID last Christmas and I had nothing to do but start a podcast. The end. That's how Growing Up Fundie became a thing. But the more that I started telling people the story, the more that they were like, I really relate to that story. I grew up super religious, didn't realize a lot of the rules were different or weird until I became an adult. I know somebody who grew up very religious, etc. And it turns out a lot of people, oh my God, thank you. Somebody said I look flawless. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Um, man, I would go and I would get the curling iron that I used to do this, but I have a parrot and I don't want to set him off. He's doing really good right now. It's a long story. Um, where was I? I forgot I was going to that. But anyway, um, so it turns out we all know people who have been impacted by religion. But all jokes aside, I love to joke around about like, hey, like this is how I grew up. I know these people, I know these facts, I know these weird things. I can quote Bible verses. I know about Revelations. Didn't think it was weird growing up. A lot of people have also been harmed by religion. And a lot of people have been, I don't want to say brainwashed because I feel like there is a cheapness with that word, but a lot of people have been negatively impacted by religions. And the more that I took a very serious interest in finding out other people's stories, the more that I started to learn. And I started to recognize how much of my own personal life was negatively impacted by religion. And so the podcast isn't attacking religion at all, but it is talking about a lot of the things that most of us were told we weren't supposed to talk about. Most of us were told these were the rules, whatever the denomination you happen to be raised within. These are the rules. Don't rock the boat. Don't ask questions. Exactly. They really are, like, I'm gonna say brainwashed. They really are brainwashed. And you don't realize until you're an adult like me and you try shrooms for the first time how much of your life is truly impacted by religion, even in ways that you don't know, right? Like, even in ways that you don't even consider. Um, I remember the first time I ever made out with a guy, literally just made out with a guy, and I felt so guilty and I felt so trashy and I felt so disgusting. And I felt like a lot of people, if they knew that secret about me, I was in college, by the way. We're not talking like 14 or 15. I was literally in college. I was almost 20 years old. And you start to realize that your view of yourself isn't actually your view of yourself at all. It's how you hope the church and the people within it view you, and it's how you hope that God views you, right? But if you start to allow yourself to ask questions, then you start to realize like these are really good questions. When you remove the fear of asking the question, because I think what hurts us the most, when I say us, I mean anybody who is raised to be religious, um, is that we are told from a young age. My parents never told me this, but the church told me this. We're raised to believe that any questions you have at the moment that you start doubting or questioning Christ, that's the devil in your mind telling you to doubt and question Christ. They tell you this for a long time. Like, again, I want to clarify, my parents never told me this. My mom never told me this, but the church did tell me this. Don't let those questions get to you. Don't let those people get to you. You're going to go off to college and there's going to be what I now know to just be liberal people. And they are going to make you question your faith and make you question your devotion to Christ, and don't fall for it. So then when you're an adult and you start to have legitimate questions about how did this all start? Where did it all come from? You start to think like, oh no, that's what they warned me about. Yep. Yeah, this comment from LGBTQ Christian says, "Great point. Anytime I got cognitive dissonance, I would think it was the devil." Exactly. And so part of you is like, this is what they always warned me about. This is what they were trying to save me from. And the other part of you is like, mm. And again, as much as I joke about shrooms being what like changed my life, it really did, because I had questions. I remember very specifically one of the very last times I went to church, and I was probably 23 or 24 at this point. Guess how old I am in the chat? Just curious. Although I've said it, I think, on the podcast. Um, I remember we were in like Sunday school, but it was the college age and like young adult Sunday school, and they separated the guys and the girls. The guys went into a different room. The girls stayed in our room. And this married girl, same age as us, no, but thank you. Not 25, but thank you. My sunscreen brand would love to hear that you think I'm 25. Um, this girl was teaching us. And the thing about the church, the thing that's wild about the church, at least American Christianity. I don't want to say this for everyone, although I am discovering in my conversations with people that it is very much similar in a lot of cultures and religions, is that once you're married, you like know everything. You like you can be 24 and single and people will treat you like you're a baby. But then the minute you get married, it's like, oh my gosh, you have so much wisdom and righteousness, and you can now lead groups and teach other girls that you were literally just like 6 weeks ago, what it's like to be a godly wife because you've been married for 60 seconds. And so this girl who was married starts to teach us the Bible verses about how it's not a woman's job to preach, it's a woman's job to sit at the foot of her husband and basically let him lead the family and to trust in him. And but she emphasized, don't, like, it's not your job to preach. You are not a preacher. Men are the preachers. Men were built to lead the church. God ordained that men should lead the church. That's how it's supposed to be. And I was not trying to be sarcastic at all. I raised my hand. First of all, I was the only girl in the room wearing pants. And I'm not trying to be one of those, like, not like other girls. That was just the first red flag, is I had pants on and nobody else did. I still journal. I've been journaling my entire life, actually. I did. I journaled, and I also kept a lot of audio notes. And I would say that I'm actually still deconstructing, even though I'm very comfortable in the way that I feel now. Somebody asked in the chat if I journaled during that time. Can you guys see the chat? Am I reading you the chat pointlessly? You listen, I'm old. I don't know what's going on. Right, exactly. This point about, I'm gonna test if you guys can see it. This point about the crushed testicles, it's also in the Bible. But I remember I raised my hand, and I asked this girl, I was like, what is the difference between what you are telling us not to do and what you are doing? And she was like, what are you talking about? And I was like, well, there's a lot of us in this room. It's like 20 of us. And you are sitting up there and you are teaching us about how women shouldn't preach. And it is not women's job to lead Christians to the Lord. It is a man's job. And I'm just curious, what is the difference between what you're doing and what preaching is? And the room got silent. And I was like, I feel like this was the wrong question to ask, which means it's a good question probably. And to date, I wish I could remember what her response was. She looked at me like this. And then I swear to you, my next memory is me leaving the room. I don't remember if I was kicked out. I don't remember if she like told me to leave. I don't remember if it was just a stunned silence and nobody said anything and I just excused myself. My brain like blacked out. I just remember I asked that question, and the next thing I knew, I was alone in the hallway getting on the elevator, and I never went back. Because that same group was also like the marriage group where you would go and like all the guys and all the girls, even though you were having conversations, you could tell you were actually being sized up for a marriage. But I was already doing stand-up at that time, and it was very difficult to like go to church and also do stand-up. It was hard to justify both lifestyles, and stand-up was more fun. I'm gonna be honest. But then I had questions. I was like, I've got a lot of questions and nobody seems interested in answering them. What's going on? And then I tripped on shrooms. And when you smoke weed and you've got questions and you write them down, the next day you're like, these are the dumbest questions I've ever seen. Well, what was I smoking? Oh yeah, I was smoking. What? It's the dumbest shit you've ever heard in your life. It's so stupid. But when I was on shrooms and I was having these like existential questions, most of which were about God and religion and faith, and I was like writing them down, then exactly, somebody said that shrooms awaken them. Again, nobody actually told me. Can you guys see the chat? Am I reading you something that you can already see? I think you can see the chat, right? So I don't have to like tell you what people are saying. You can, I don't know. Anyway, the next day they were still really good questions. And I tell people all the time, I went into shrooms thinking that I was a Republican Christian. And the very next day, I swear to you, the very next day, I was a liberal Democrat atheist, like literally that fast. And I think that's because, though, I don't think it was that fast. I think that's because I'd had questions for a very long time. And I had moved from Arkansas to Chicago after college, actually in high school, but back after college. And oh, thank you for telling me you can see the chat. Thank you. I'm, like I said, I'm old. And so I think I'd been having this transitional, what we now call deconstruction, for a while, but I was afraid to admit it because for those of you who grew up religious, I don't know if maybe you've experienced the same thing. A lot of people I've talked to on my podcast have experienced the same thing. You're afraid to let go. You start asking really good questions and then you start freaking out about the answers because the answers aren't at all what you've been told your entire life they're supposed to be, right? And so you're doing that thing we talked about earlier where you're like, is this the devil winning? Am I one of the people they warned me about in church? Am I falling, right? Is this the devil like getting his grips on me and making it seem real delicious to no longer go to church? Or is this just rationality? Or is this just me thinking critically about like, hey, a lot of this doesn't make sense. Like, hey, between the new book and the old book, there's a lot of contradictions. Also, if there was allowed to be a new book at one time, why can't we make a new book? Why are the rules stopping us from making a third new book that's more tailored toward today's world, right? So stand up actually didn't really play a role at all in my religious path. Believe it or not, that's one of the questions. Believe it or not, people were actually super cool about it. So I worked for the Second City for 13 years. I'm actually still working at the Second City. I lived in Chicago for 13 years, still work for the Second City. Started working there in 2015. And then I started teaching there in 2017. And so I was on showcases there a lot. And one of the showcases they had that was surprisingly popular, I still to this day do not know why, was a Sunday morning storytelling show and a Sunday morning stand-up comedy show. I still have no idea how they were that popular. I was not up that early on a Sunday except to do those shows. Those are the only times. And so afterward, they'd all be like, hey, let's go get brunch. And I'd be like, actually, I'm going a couple blocks down to church. I went to the Moody Church. And people were surprisingly cool about it. Believe it or not, the people I've run into in my life that are the most judgmental about religion are other religious people. Either you're not religious enough, or you're not devout enough, or you're not part of their denomination and theirs is the best one, or they're more religious than you because they can recite certain verses, or they dress more modestly than you. Non-religious people have always been very respectful to me. And I know that there's this trope with atheism where some atheists are like loud and they're like, oh, you're a dumbass if you're a Christian, yada, yada, yada. And those do exist, but I truly only ever saw those on YouTube or maybe on Reddit back in the day. I never ran into those people in real life. And maybe that makes me an outlier. But so that was actually never an issue. It was more that they were not surprised at all when I stopped going to church. For example, I remember the first Sunday that they were like, oh, let's all go to brunch. What's up, Moon Shoes? Good to see you. I remember the first Sunday where all the comedians were like, hey, let's go to brunch. And I said something like, where are we going? And they were like, don't you have church? And I was like, nope. And they were like, okay. And then they never, like, nobody ever asked me about it until I want to say during the pandemic. I did a lot of like comedy classes and stuff on Zoom, and I did a lot of like one-on-one helping people write content and write jokes and stuff. And somebody asked me then, they were like, hey, I know it's been like 8 years, but didn't you used to go to church? And then we had the whole conversation about like, yeah, but I'm not religious anymore. That was me trying to hang on, trying to grasp at those final straws and not wanting to let go. And then I did shrooms and then I realized it was okay. And ever since then, I've just kind of made it more of a journey to figure out what I believe now. And currently, I feel very comfortable in what I believe. I identify as an agnostic atheist, and I know in some chapters is that in some realms that's not a thing, right? They're like, you got to pick one. Listen, so I'm an atheist, but if I saw the proof that I needed that God existed, I would not deny that proof, right? Now, what does that mean? For a lot of people, oh, you do. Moon Shoes has a shroom session on Sunday. Man, I wish you lived in Nashville, man, because then I would also have a shroom session on Sunday. But I know that for a lot of people, that proof is much different. Like, what would it take for you to believe? What would it take for you to believe? I do not believe that there is a God. Hey, Slicey, what's going on? I don't believe it. I don't think he's real. I don't think he exists. I don't believe in a higher power. I know some people are agnostic or atheists, but they believe in like spirituality, or they believe a there is like a God, some form. There's a higher power of some form. I don't believe that at all. I think when we die, we're dead. The end. I'm pretty solid in those beliefs. It would take God literally coming down when I'm not on shrooms and being like, "This is me. I am real." And even if that were the case, even if he was like, "This is me. I'm real," I still would be like, "Why are your rules so fucked up? Like, what is going on?" Am I allowed to say fuck on live stream? Are they gonna kick this off? I don't know. I'm not sure. But here we go. And I still would not worship him, but I would talk to him about it. I'd be like, these are all the issues that I have with how you run things. And if he's the biblical God, he'd be like, well, I don't care. And then if he's not, he'd be like, maybe let's talk about it. I don't know. But I don't believe there is one. And even if there was one, I don't believe that the version of Christianity that we have currently in America would be the correct one anyway. I believe that all religions that currently exist right now would just be incorrect. Because if there is a God, that means he created the world, billions of years ago, and he created the rules billions of years ago, and we've just been playing telephone this whole time. So even if he is real, he's not the God of the Bible. He's not even the Incan and the Mayan God, even though at least their God makes a lot more sense than ours does, right? But that's kind of how I personally feel about it. But at the same time, I would never deny, I would never I would never double down and be like, no, you can't show me anything. I'm not even going to look with my eyeballs. I wouldn't be like that. I wouldn't be one of those militants. That's how it goes. So basically all I'm going to do is just cash in on the fact that I knew the Duggars growing up. Did religion come up during your debates? Good question. So I don't know if I've talked about this on the podcast before, but when I was in college, I was actually a professional debater. And that was actually one of the things that started my deconstruction was, and this was long before I even admitted to myself that I was an atheist, is I was a professional debater. I went on a full ride scholarship to do debate for my university. And I remember thinking to myself, I remember being like, okay, so for everyone else, for every other instance in my life, I require not just evidence, but I require multiple forms of evidence. I require answers to my questions. I'm allowed to cross-examine people. I'm expected to defend myself. I'm doing research to back up what I'm saying and having evidence and proof myself as much as I am expecting my opponent to have just as much evidence and proof. And if they don't respond to it in debate, we said silence is compliance. And no response means that the point flows to the opponent. So if I ask you a question, or if I make a point and you don't address it at all, or you don't answer that question, that makes me right. And why does that not apply to religion? Like, why was it that I expected everyone to have all of this evidence, including myself, to prove everything? We're talking sources, we're talking proof, we're talking, and not just any source. Like, Wikipedia wasn't considered a verified source when I was in debate. Like, you had to have good, trustworthy sources. So why is it that then, with what is supposed to be the most important aspect of my life ever to exist, I don't require proof? The whole thing is belief, trust, like just believe. Why do you need proof? If you don't truly believe, then you're not really a believer. That doesn't make any sense, right? So the least I can do is expect of myself what I expect of other people and be able to answer questions with evidence, or say that I have enough evidence to say that it's not true. I don't know. That's just me. So I grew up Baptist, but my mom called us religion whores because we would go to like a bunch of different churches. I don't even remember why. We went to Baptist churches more than anything else, but I think I went to a Catholic church a couple times, and then I went to an Anglican church in Canada once. Wild shit. I've only ever been to that one, so I don't know if it's all Anglicans. If there's any Anglicans in the chat, let me know. But so I was in Canada. We were on a road trip, and we stopped at an Anglican church. Guys, they were like cursing in the pulpit. The dude said fuck like 6 times. There were kids in there. There were like kids running around in the church service, like in the main room. And this guy was like, he was excited. He was like talking about God and stuff like that. But he was like, and I told them, fuck it. I'm just going to follow the God, whatever he said. I blacked out. Like I was like 15 and I heard the F word. I just had a blackout moment. It was wild though. And I've always been so curious if all Anglicans are all Anglicans like that, or did I just find the one rural Anglican church that allows you to say the F bomb in the pulpit? Is that Canadians? Is that like, I don't know. I don't know. I haven't been back to Canada since then, but it was a wild trip. Somebody asked, what do you, let's see, with the experiences you had during your Christian years, like, did you have a personal relationship and what did that mean to you? That's a really great question. I actually remember the day. Oh no, you're good. Don't worry about it. I actually remember the day that I told my mom. I was 9 years old or 10 years old. Listen, the only reason I have expressive eyes is because I draw on my eyebrows every day. They wash right off. They go down the sink. But thank you. So I remember the day that I told my mom that I was ready to accept Jesus into my heart as my personal savior. And it was a very emotional day. I remember she was like, this is a big commitment. Are you sure? Because in a lot of religions, I know they baptize you as a baby. In the Southern Baptist culture, they don't. You come to know God yourself and you decide when you're ready. And then you get baptized in front of the church. And it's like a whole thing. It's a big like coming of age. It's like a Baptist quinceanera, basically. And so I remember I was like, I think I'm ready. I think I'm ready to like accept him into my heart as my personal savior. Like I want to be, we call it saved. And once you're saved, you can't be unsaved. You are washed in the blood of the Lamb. And it was a big deal. And I really felt it. Like I felt that experience. I remember thinking like, I felt God with me, right? I felt, and like looking back, I'm like, did I feel God? Or did I just feel watched all the time? Did I feel God or did I just feel group think from the tribe? Did I just feel group acceptance from the tribe? Did I know from a young age what to say in order to make the grown-ups really proud of me, right? And so I think those feelings that I felt, those like, and I've actually talked about this on a very recent episode of the podcast. There's an episode where I talked to 3 pastors. One is a current pastor, 2 are former pastors. And one of them asked me, what do you say that feeling is if God isn't real? When you feel that powerful, overwhelming sense of like love and peace and like your body just tingles and you feel God's presence, like what do you call that? Because people really do have that experience. What do you call that if it's not God? And now I've read enough. I've got a whole library of books back there on how God's not real and like science and all that. Now I've read enough and I hide those because this is the guest room where my parents stay when they come over. So I hide them with like Little House on the Prairie and stuff. What was I going to say? Oh yeah. So I've read enough now to know about like human biology and the way that we survived when we were ancient people and the way that acceptance from the group and acceptance from the tribe was so important to us. And this idea that a fatherly figure was watching over us was so easy to believe because we are some of the only creatures on earth that can put an idea to someone who's not standing in front of us. And here's what I mean. Dolphins, to my knowledge, cannot say, I'm going to take this shell to Jerry Dolphin because he will love it. Dolphins don't really say that. Pigs don't really say that, right? And those are very intelligent creatures. But to our knowledge, and maybe I'm wrong, I'll Google this afterward, but to my knowledge that I've looked up so far, they can't say like, I'm going to take this thing to someone who's not here. I don't see them. I don't know where they're at because they're going to like it. Or monkeys can't say like, I'm not going to communicate to my father or to my mother that I did a certain thing because they will be very upset. Animals are very visual. They can do things in the moment that upset each other, and they can do things in the moment that make each other happy. But humans have a unique ability to apply a feeling to somebody who's not present. You can pick up a sweater and say, oh my gosh, like Mark would love this. I'm going to buy this for Mark. And then Mark loves it. So this idea that we can then say, there's a God. We never see him. We never talk to him. We never communicate with him, but he loves us. He's proud of us or he's disappointed in us, depending on what it is that we've done. And oh, thank you. Somebody says, thank you for your videos. I finally had the courage to stop calling myself a Christian last year, and stories like yours helped me with my own journey. Thank you so much. I love that. I absolutely love that. That's why I'm doing this, because even if one person gets help from this, that's one more person that doesn't have to question themselves and question their life and their morality and their purpose anymore. It's okay to not have a purpose. That's the crazy part is a lot of religious people be like, well, then if there's no God, what's the point of human beings? And I'm like, there doesn't have to be a point. There doesn't have to be a point. Now, am I striving to make a purpose with my life? Sure, because I'm here, because I'm living. Why not do something that can help other human beings and, put us forward into the future in a positive way? But there doesn't have to be a purpose. I know that I'm all over the place, but I just need to say some things. So let's see, somebody says, I've never had that group feeling before, which is probably why I've never had a strong connection with God when I was a Christian. And that's actually a really good point. There are definitely people who are born without that feeling. And I think there are also cultures who, for whatever reason, don't always support that feeling. There are groups of people where their entire thing is don't stand out, don't celebrate, don't be unique in any way, just to like blend into the crowd. But I think you're right. I think not being able to feel that kind of like hive mind acceptance might actually benefit you in the long run in terms of not falling for things like deities, right? You're not necessarily gullible in the same way that somebody like I am, because I'm a people pleaser. I've been a people pleaser since I was born. That's just how my brain is wired. Not everyone is a people pleaser. And I would also say that if you look at the different cultures, there's even a couple of religions who downplay the group think, and they downplay, have a relationship with everyone that's in this religion. They're also known to be very aggressive. They're also known to be quite scary. They're also known to be very, very judgmental. So even when you take that group think away from large groups of people, and they can't communicate with one another, but they try to force it. They try to force that group. I feel like I'm kind of going off on a tangent. They try to force that group activity and make a religion out of the idea that none of them really want to bond with each other. That becomes almost like a problem, as opposed to people who are willing to say, I don't get along with other people. I don't feel welcome by groups, so I'm not going to try and force it. Right? I'm going to accept who I am. I'm going to thrive the way that I am. I'm not going to try and force myself to join a religion because it doesn't make sense to me, because I don't have that inherent group think built into me. I'm just going to live my best life. And I hope that's what you're doing. I hope you're living your best life out there, because lucky you for not needing the acceptance and the pleasure, lucky you for not needing a God to tell you that you are a good person and just leaving yourself to be a good person. I'm trying to think of Calvinism. That's who I was trying to think of that whole time when I was talking about like aggressive religions who try to take their inability to fit in with a group and force a group out of it, which doesn't make sense. Calvinism. Look it up. Scary shit I've ever seen. Excuse me, I choked on shit. What model of morality do you follow, if you don't mind sharing? Oh, absolutely. 100%. Well, you're doing great, Slicey. You're doing great. And I love you for it. So what model of morality do I follow? So here's the thing. I've always thought that the 10 Commandments were just decent advice. I don't think the Bible made up the 10 Commandments, even though a lot of people seem to think that the Bible made up the 10 Commandments. Excuse me. So, for example, I don't kill people. Why? Because I don't think that's a good thing to do. It is counterproductive for somebody like me who wants nothing but the best for humanity, and I want things to keep getting better for us. So I'm not going to kill anybody. Just trying to fix my light here, guys. Sorry. There we go. I don't steal. Why? Because I don't feel like stealing is beneficial in terms of the upward mobility of humanity. If I stole, do I think that I would go to hell? No. Would I go to jail? Probably. Right. The majority of what I do is just to stay out of jail. Right. I just don't want to go to jail. It has nothing to do with God. It has nothing to do with the afterlife or judgment. It's literally like, it is so easy to not do bad shit. And I'm lazy. I'm a lazy person. I started a podcast because I don't like leaving my house, but I like putting things out there that I created, right? So, like, stealing takes effort. Being a murderer takes effort. Being an asshole takes effort, right? It's really not hard to not be an asshole, at least for me. And maybe I'm lucky in that regard. But it takes extra effort to be a dick, right? So It just makes sense to me that I don't do that. If I know that I don't like having my emotions played with, I'm not going to play with other people's emotions. If I know that, like, say, for example, I go out on a date and it didn't go well, I would want the person to be like, hey, I don't want to waste your time. It didn't go well. Great. Didn't go well for me either. Thank you for being honest. Or maybe it did go well for me. Bummer to hear it didn't go well for you, but thank you for being honest. I just treat people the way that I want to be treated. Oh, is it Nidemus? Is that how you say your name? Nidemos? Nidemus? Pine Creek is the one who told me I should go live. So that's funny that you found me through him. Nitty. There you go. I love it. I'll call you Nitty. Yeah, he's the one who told me I should go live, and he's also the one that recommended this webcam. I actually asked him what webcam he used, and he told me. I don't know if that counts as a recommendation. But where are we going? Oh, morality. Everybody who is religious thinks that you have to have religion to have morals, and I don't think that's the case at all. If anything, I would say that people who don't have religion, I actually trust much more to be moral people because they're not doing it for the heaven points, right? If you offer me a ride and you are an evangelical Christian, I'm probably guessing that the reason that you're offering me a ride is because you want to be a good person because you want to make it to heaven, right? It's not Sydney looks like she needs a ride. I'm going to give her a ride just because she's my friend and I want to give her a ride. It's Sydney needs a ride. I want to give her a ride because she's my friend. And also at church or on Facebook or on Insta, I can tell the world how I did this good deed, right? Like, or even in my head, even if I don't post it anywhere else, I remember being a very religious, devout person. And like, I'm going to be honest with myself. A lot of the good stuff that you do is kind of for the points, right? And this was before everybody like filmed their good deeds and put them on TikTok. This was back in the day before everybody had the cellular phones and all that. Okay, good. I thought that was my bird's water cup for a second, but I just took a big swig out of it. It's not. So I actually think that people who do kind things are actually more likely to be good, just, and moral people because they're not doing it for any kind of payment. They're not doing it for any kind of reward. You're brave for going live, by the way. Not everyone has the balls to do that. Thank you. Thank you. Everybody's being so nice. Usually when I put content out on the internet, people just like insult my eyebrows constantly. So I was really worried that this would become like an eyebrow roast, and I appreciate that it hasn't. Although feel free to do so in the comments if that's how you feel. So if somebody is helping the homeless and donating money and giving rides to people who need them and offering jobs to people who need them and walking dogs for their friends when their friends can't get home from work early enough, I'm actually a Sagittarius. Is somebody else saying that? Or maybe you weren't even talking about me. Maybe I'm just assuming. I don't know. But I trust them much more than the person who I think is doing it for heaven points. Much, much more. I have a few friends actually who were not raised religious. And I remember telling them, like, I really want to take you to a church because we live in Tennessee. I was like, I really want to take you to a mega church. And he was like, why? They'll kick us out. And I was like, no, they won't kick us out. Hey, Andy, how's it going? Andy's episode is up. His is the most recent episode. You should go check it out. He is proof that I actually read the submission form when you submit to be a guest and have you on the podcast. What's going on, Andy? Thanks for showing up to the live. What was I saying? Oh yeah, I was telling my friend, I was like, no, if we showed up to the church and we told them we were not religious and we had never been there before, they would envelop us with, I was about to say tentacular arms. I don't know if that's a word, but it sounds good. They would envelop us and they would welcome us and they would absorb us into the fold because they need those heaven points. They need those, right? They need that good, right? Up in the heavenly gates, especially if they can tell everybody else in the church, like, oh, I greeted them. I told them they could stay. They can sit by me. You can sit by me. It's totally fine. And so that's not a person that I trust to be moral because I don't think that they're doing it for the right reasons. And so, sorry, I was trying to read and talk at the same time. What would you say if someone feels like they are missing out on the whole community aspect of religion? I would say there are 1,000 other communities they can join. I am a member of a Tennessee parrot owners group. I'm a member of a Tennessee pit bull owners group. I was in debate for many, many years, had nothing to do with religion, right? There are sports teams that you can play. There are probably atheist groups that you can be a part of. I don't know many of them, but you can definitely do it. And I know the ones on Reddit, but I don't know any like in-person groups that you can join. You can go to the strip club. You can absolutely. If somebody's fear of not being in a group is why they are staying in religion, that's like, whoa, they need to spend more time on the internet because there are so many groups. There's so many groups. You can join a reading group. You can join groups at the library. You can join groups that go to coffee. You can join knitting groups. Like there are so many groups. I'm a stand-up comedian. I know a bajillion comedians across the country. Like that's a group that counts on Facebook groups with all these different cities of comedians. If groupthink is the only reason that you're staying in religion, wow, you must not have Wi-Fi, right? But at the same time, I don't mean to discount what they're talking about because religion does have a very unique familial bond that you don't get in a lot of these groups. Churches have a way of making you feel polyamory groups. True, absolutely true. I've not been a part of a polyamory group. Don't take my word for it, but I'm pretty sure they're out there. What was I saying? Oh yeah. So I totally understand why somebody would be afraid to leave the church because they do such a good job of making the church a family experience. If you go against God, you're going against the family. It's like the mafia. It's literally like the mafia. They're like, like you come to me on my daughter's day of my daughter's wedding. You ask me for a favor, like another favor. That's terrible. I'm so sorry. So I totally get that. Like I don't discount it. I'm not saying like, oh, you're a dumbass if the only reason you go to church is because of the group. It is if you are religious or if you have not deconstructed yet, but maybe you're not sure, it is arguably the most important group that you will ever be a part of in your life. Thank you. Thank you, Brian. No, for more impressions, you gotta watch my stand-up. I don't know, come to my shows. Yeah, board games, trivia nights, music creator meetups, exactly. Meditation groups, exactly. And all of those groups you just mentioned are 10 times healthier than why would I want to go to a group that's going to tell me I fucked up and I'm going to hell all the time? All the time. What kind of group is that? Now I will say, if you're a Baptist and you're new to the church, you will get banana bread like you have never seen. When I was a kid, so I was a fat kid. I remember I used to go up to the ladies after church every day and be like, nobody stood up when you asked if anybody was new. Do you think maybe like, are you like, if you don't have anyone to give that banana bread to, I'll take it. My mom got really mad. She's like, stop asking for the banana bread. Like, I'll make you some banana bread. But church lady banana bread is the moistest, most decadent. It is the closest to believing in God I've ever been. It is the closest to experiencing the Lord I have ever come in contact with. Second closest is a real good guacamole. Like that's if somebody's like, what's the closest thing you've ever seen to God? Baptist lady banana bread is unbeatable. But they never gave it to me. They probably looked at me and were like, you need more bananas, less bread, child. But that's neither here nor there. So I said all that to say I don't discount what they mean when they say that, but that is not a good enough excuse to stay religious if they don't truly believe in God. Get a fine wine and do communion with that banana bread. I love banana bread too, especially with chocolate chips. Yes, banana bread with chocolate chips. Yeah, I was about to listen. Ever since I got COVID, for some reason, I've been doing the chef's kiss a lot. I swear to God, the day I got COVID, I started doing like the chef's kiss when I'm talking, and I can't stop it. I'm trying not to do it. I've had COVID twice now, and it's my brain's never been the same. I think I became like an Italian or something. I don't know. Oh no, is that? I don't know. That's not it. There's also an Adderall shortage, so I apologize. I have not had my Adderall medication in a long time, so I apologize if this is all over the place. But more questions. I'll take questions in the chat if you got them. Communion bread, best. I'm telling you, homemade communion bread, probably pretty good. I think I took communion as a Lutheran once, although they should call youth group in a Lutheran church Lutheran. I think I'm going to trademark that. I've charged the church. No, buying just the way you are. Thanks. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Next time, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to live stream the first Friday of every month. I just had to move it this month because I couldn't do it last Friday. But I promise you, I will bring the parrot on next time. Picasso will be here with us. Maybe every week I'll bring a different animal. Godzilla isn't here with me, my dog, but she's sleeping, so I can't bring her up. But I'll promise you that. I can't promise you much. I can't promise you anything more interesting, but I can promise you animals. How much time do you spend, if any, listening to YouTube apologists or Christians? A lot, because I'm inviting them to be guests. Back in like 2018 or 2000 and no wait no back in like 2015, I was huge into listening to atheists, and I was huge into listening to like the YouTubers who like at the time Mr. Atheist was like a really big one. I listened to Thunderfoot, who was also not Mr. Atheist, although I do listen to him. It was The Amazing Atheist, sorry, and Thunderfoot. I used to watch their stuff all the time. I used to watch the what is that channel called? It used to have The Amazing Atheist on it. It was like the group of dudes who would get on all the time. I completely spaced on their name. But I used to watch a ton of YouTube atheists while I was first deconstructing. And now I actually watch a lot more religious videos. I watch a lot more like apologists and stuff like that because I'm trying to get them to be a guest on my podcast. Dark Matter, yep. Theremin Trees, yep. Lots of those bigger atheist channels. But now I have a very difficult time getting apologists to be on the podcast. And I think it's because they think they're going to be attacked, even though I will say in the next 2 and 3 weeks, I do have a lot of Christians that are coming onto the podcast. And a lot of them are actually quite well known, both on YouTube and through their podcasts and their organizations, which was very surprising to me. But atheists and agnostic and people who are formerly religious, they are very eager to talk to me because they've pretty much figured out where they are in life and they've figured out how they feel about things. Religious people, I think, even the ones in leadership in the church, I think they are still a little bit skeptical. I think everybody is secretly skeptical of religion, with the exception of maybe the insane zealots, even though I wouldn't be surprised at all if they were also somewhat skeptical. And the reason they are so crazy and zealot is because they don't want anybody else to think they are. They're like, oh, if I act crazy religious, nobody will think that I'm secretly questioning how none of this makes sense. But even just your mainstream Christian vlogger or blogger or social media personality, I think they are wary too of somebody asking them questions because I think they think it's going to be like a gotcha. I think they think I'm going to get them on here and try to debate with them. And that's not what I'm going to do because I think that everybody's opinion should be welcome. And I think that everybody's story is just as legitimate as anyone else's. But I do think it's important to hear their perspective and to hear why it is they think the way they do in a positive setting, because I think that will help people like us who have deconstructed or who were never religious. It will help us understand where they're coming from and communicate with them better and just exist around them a lot better. If all you ever do is listen to debates between atheists and Christians, it gets you fired up, it gets you angry, and all you're ever going to do is be pissed off at religious people. But if you sit down and you talk to somebody and you're like, why do you think this? Why do you believe this? Why did you publish this blog? Why did you say this? Etc. At least you'll know where they're coming from, even if you don't agree. Yeah, and somebody said they're excited to hear those interviews. I'm excited to interview them. I'm actually interviewing somebody like any minute now after this live stream. But and then have you ever had any upset or angry reactions to the podcast? I have not. I actually have not. Not that they've told me. It's very interesting. So 3 of my most staunch supporters are currently pastors. 3 of the people who share my work the most with like their congregation and with their friends and their family are pastors. And I think it's because I have an equal mix of guests, so they can listen to all of the episodes that are religious based and they're like, yes, I agree with all of that. And it's a much smoother transition into listening to the ones that are anti-religious or not religious, the guests, because they can be like, oh, well, it's a shame that they feel that way, but nobody is getting ugly or being mean here. And I know that like debate is really super popular. But that's just not what I'm here to do. I'm just here to give people a place where they can explain where they're coming from, and they can try and break down where they're coming from as clearly as possible to people who they already know don't agree with them, and some people who do agree with them, um, in an organized and productive manner. Because I think the minute that everything gets angry and ugly and debate worthy, when you're doing stuff for like the shock value and the views, that's when you lose the ability to help people. And what I would like to happen is for people to come to me for the religious episodes and to listen to the rest of the episodes and to hear themselves in some of those episodes. I'm not out to make people atheists, but I am out to help people who have questions and they don't have answers to them, and they're in agony because they think they're the only ones who feel the way that they do. And now they're listening to people who are giant on YouTube or whatever, Instagram, or whatever the way that I found them is, whatever platform they're well known for. I'm going to have a lot of podcast hosts in the next couple of episodes for both atheist podcasts as well as apologist podcasts as well. And they're like, oh, I see myself in those people. Interesting. Now I have had people kind of wig out just a little bit. I have had people that are very religious listen to episodes where my non-religious guests made very, very good points, and they private messaged me and they're like, "Oh my god, oh my god, oh my god, what does this mean for me? What does this mean for me?" And I have had to talk a couple people off a ledge and be like, "Hey, you can ask yourself that question all day long. You can talk to me about it anytime, but also feel free to go eat a snack, take a nap, drink some chamomile tea, relax, and then come back when you aren't quite so nervous about it, and let's have a conversation about it." That's the closest I've ever come to somebody being mad about it. They weren't even mad. They were just freaking out because they're like, but if what they're saying is true, then that means this isn't true. And they're having like an existential crisis. And you're like, it's okay. It's all right. We're all friends here. You are safe and warm in an environment where people love you. Sydney, I've always wondered where you got your intro music. It's awesome. Gets me psyched for your videos. Yay! That's awesome. That's awesome. It was literally just a free song that I found on my video editor like a year ago, and I liked it so much. I was like, "Oh, this is like pumping me up. This is like amping me up." I loved it. So I'm glad you like it too. I've always wondered if people were annoyed by it. I'm gonna keep it because I like it, and that's all that matters, I guess, at the end of the day. But I've always wondered if that was annoying or not. I'm so glad somebody likes it. Somebody says, I find cultivating neutral space for expressiveness is very hard, but I have a share of streams where Christians come on. Yes. So I think my debate background helps with the neutral space for expressiveness. I think because I'm so used to being in debates that got super duper savage and ugly very quickly, that that doesn't hurt me anymore. And also, I've been doing stand up long enough that people just like have insulted me on the internet for so long that when something goes well, I'm actually pleasantly surprised. Like, one thing I've loved about this podcast is all of you have been so nice. I've never in my life before the year that I started this podcast logged onto YouTube, had 5 notifications, and it's been a good day, right? And you guys are so cool. You're so nice. Even in the comments where you're disagreeing with one another, it's respectful, it's interesting, it's progressive, and I think it's awesome. I think it's awesome. And I've never experienced anything like it, which is why I wanted to start like doing lives and stuff, because I just love you guys. You guys are just dope as hell. And if you came from Pine Creek or T Jump or anybody else that I've ever talked to, please bring the rest of your friends if you're like this too, because I've never had so many people be nice to me on the internet in a long time. And I was telling my brother about that, and he's like, that's really depressing, Sydney. He's like, that doesn't sound mentally healthy. Amy Newman. I don't know who that is, but I am going to look her up. Amy Newman. See, I actually do write this stuff down. Yeah, exactly. You have a thick skin or people don't make a dent. Yes, I've been insulted enough in my life on the internet that when I get like a positive, I'm like, oh, that was really nice. Also, whenever you guys put nice things in the comments, I screenshot them and I keep them in a folder, and I go through that folder on days where I'm not feeling so good. And then on days where I'm feeling too good, on days where I'm like, I'm too cocky, I go through the folder that I keep all the mean comments in, and it brings me right back down. Highly recommend it. Just kidding. Don't do that. This one time I sent the folder of mean comments to my brother, and he was like, "Are these real?" He's like, "Is this real? Like, I don't understand what's going on here." Maybe that's only funny to me. I don't know. I think it's hilarious. But I'm going to take a couple more questions, and then I'm going to have to hop off and talk to somebody that I'm interviewing for the podcast. But I'll take maybe like one more question, or maybe two if they're smaller questions. This has been so great, guys. I literally hopped on here thinking there'd be 0 people and being totally fine with it. I was just going to riff. I was just going to read. I had some Reddit threads pulled up that I was going to read out loud for anybody who watches afterward. Favorite comedians. So Craig Ferguson. I actually reached out, I believe, to Apollo. That sounds so familiar. I think I actually reached out to them. I think. I don't want to say that's wrong. I know that name is on one of my lists. Not Shannon Q. I've never reached out to Shannon Q, but I'm almost 100% sure that I reached out to Paulo J last week. They're at least on my list. But favorite comedians. So I've always loved Craig Ferguson from The Late Late Show. Craig Ferguson on The Late Late Show is what got me started in stand-up. So that he's always, I know like people are like, well, he's not a real comedian. First of all, yes, he is. He started in stand-up. Second of all, he literally changed my life. The two people who changed my life the most were David Sedaris and Craig Ferguson. I'm currently getting my MFA in creative nonfiction so I can write a memoir. David Sedaris, Craig Ferguson. Those two human beings changed my life more so than shrooms. And shrooms changed my life on a major level, but those two people are my heroes. I reached out to some of these people that you're talking to. I've actually reached out to. It just takes a while for people to get back to me sometimes because I imagine they get a ton of emails that are like, "Hey, like fuck you" or whatever. Good timing because I need to go to bed anyway. It's 4 a.m. It's 4 a.m. where you live. Thank you so much for joining. That's awesome. Well, guys, I'm gonna hop off here, and I'm going to get ready for my interview with our next guest, who is interviewing me at the same time for their podcast. First time that's ever happened. I've never been on another atheist podcast before. The closest I've ever been to interviewed by somebody else was a couple of my guests have asked me some pretty interesting questions. But thank you so much for coming. I'm going to be here the first Friday of every month. And if it goes well, I would like to add some more Fridays, but I don't want to get too far ahead of myself. So it won't be live. No, it won't be live. I'm actually hopping off here and hopping on Zoom to talk to my guests. So it's not going to be live. I'm going to end the stream in just a couple seconds. But thank you so much for coming. I love you guys. You're the best. You asked fantastic questions. You listened to me go off on my tangents. And I really, really enjoyed this experience. So thank you so much. And now I don't have to delete it from my channel because nobody showed up. You guys are awesome. And I will figure out how to get like calls going and how to get guests on here. But I literally just learned how to live stream tonight. So baby steps again. And then maybe it'll be a party, right? But I will talk to you guys later. Have a good evening. Have a good morning, wherever you are. And I will see you the first Friday of next month. Thanks, guys. Bye.